I think about how broad my talents and skills have developed over the years because I've been open to trying new things.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello, my name's Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm the author of 6 books about raising happy families, and I'm here with my wife and my podcast co-host, Mrs. Happy Families, Kylie. And Kylie, today I want to talk about something that we've kind of gone backwards and forwards about a little bit in preparation for our podcast and our planning, but it was a really tough one to kind of figure out where to go with it, and we kind of still have some questions about it. So I'm really curious to see how our conversation goes on this topic. I received an email from somebody via podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. That's podcasts with an S, podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. And I'm not going to read the whole email. It was just too long, but essentially, this is what it said. We've moved recently, last 6 months or so. Transition for the kids has been really tough. And there were a whole lot of reasons that it's been tough and the kids are struggling to make friends. And I thought, oh, well, that's okay. That's what the podcast will be about. But then this mum said, but I'm struggling. What about the parents? Where's the village for us? And I got this sense of loneliness and isolation. And I thought, well, we've moved a lot of times over the years. We've moved everywhere from being in New South Wales, heading up to central Queensland. We've been down into Wollongong. We've been into Victoria, ended up in Newcastle, back to Brisbane. We've been all over the place. And one thing that you do incredibly well is you build a village. You're amazing at making friends. And you proved it just recently with something that happened just the other morning.
We've started this tradition of riding to school with the kids.
We talk about it in every podcast now. We went for another bike ride with the kids to and from school.
And little Miss Emily, she's got so much enthusiasm, but as she's going down those hills, she gets a little bit scared if she sees someone at the other end of the hill. And so she's screaming before she's even reached for her bell.
Like 200 metres away. They can't hear. And she's saying, look out, I'm coming.
And so there is a couple that I have watched for the best part of this year, and they walk their son and dog to school every day.
Well, they walk with the dog as they take their son to school because I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
And I've just loved watching, the way they interact with each other. The husband and wife are holding hands, and the son, is walking along. It's peaceful.
They're pretty serene together, aren't they?
It's peaceful watching them. And to be honest, it has actually been the inspiration behind once we moved to that school and recognised just how close it was that we would do something similar. The kids didn't want to walk, they wanted to ride. And so that's kind of how it's all started. And so the other day, Emily almost ran them off the road and again. And, I kind of waved as I rode past with them on the way to school and said, thanks, we're so sorry kind of thing. And, but it was on the way back. I kind of, as I went to ride past, I thought, you know what? I just want to stop and say thank you. And so I kind of stopped up next to them and they kind of looked at me a little bit weary, like, who was this crazy woman?
And what's she about to attack us about? And
what's she about to say? Yeah. And I said, guys, I just wanted to let you know that I've watched you walk to and from school for some time now, and our kids have only just moved to this school a few weeks ago, but it's your example that has actually been the motivation for our family doing what we're doing now, riding to school. You should have seen the look on their faces. They kind of, their eyes lit up and they just, this massive smile of, wow, thanks for taking the time to let me know. And so we just waved off. And now I've noticed every day as we ride past each other, there's just this beautiful recognition and warmth that exudes from both of them as they kind of acknowledge me on my travels.
That's kind of my point. You're good at building a village. You know how to kind of reach out. But it was surprising for them because people don't do that, right? So I'm thinking about this mum and I'm trying to work out what do you say to a grown-up? I mean, all the time we're talking about how kids can make friends, and we can probably talk about that a little bit as well. But what do you say to a grown-up, a mum who's feeling isolated, who in her email proved that, in previous places that she'd lived, she'd had really great community, really great sense of village and relationships, and now feels disconnected, so alone?
So I was doing a count. We've done 12 solid moves in our time together as husband and wife, and 8 of those moves were interstate moves. They were big moves.
Wow.
And In the early years, it was actually really adventurous. I was so excited to kind of see Australia and explore new places with you and our young family. And it wasn't until our children got older that it became a little bit more hard, because I was then watching them struggle with the transition. And, as I think about the experiences that this particular family are having, and I'm sure they're not the only ones out there, I really resonate with it. In so many ways, it can feel so lonely to be in this new space and not know who to reach out to and not feel like anyone's got your back. It's so nice to know that you can just knock on your neighbour's door and ask for an egg if you're in the middle of cooking a cake, for instance, which has happened numerous times in our home, and realise that somebody ate the eggs in the morning. They're just such a simple thing, and yet it just makes you feel like you have a sense of community when you can do that. So where do you go with that?
Well, let's talk more about that in just a sec. We're going to talk about how we can build relationships and friendships for the family, and especially for an isolated mum, in just a tick.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Are screens creating tension at home? Tweens, Teens and Screens is a webinar to guide families to healthy, safe super screen solutions. Buy it today at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And this time we're trying to actually help out a parent with not so much a parenting issue, but just a feeling isolated and lonely kind of an issue. Somebody who's previously had great friendships in the places she's lived, but has emailed us and said, my kids are struggling a little bit, but I'm actually the one struggling with the village thing myself. And, I was thinking about this and I thought one thing that you've always done really well is you've taken advantage of any relationships that our children have with other people's kids and sort of leveraged into relationships with people that way. So if one of our children has a friend, you'll contact the parents and say, hey, wondered if you wanted to have a meet up at the park. You don't even bring them to our house. It's neutral territory, but it's just, let's start to build that relationship really slowly. Or you have a little birthday party and say, parents are invited too. This is we've got girls, so this is a mums and daughters party. And you've done a couple of those parties where mums have come with their daughters and they've been involved in a sort of a pamper thing together or done some sort of an activity. And those kinds of things have really helped you to develop some relationships that have, in some cases, been really long lasting, become quite deep.
Yeah, I think a couple of things stands out as you were talking. I think it's really important that we're open to new relationships in unexpected places. We kind of, I think, sometimes get caught up in, I'm this kind of person and so therefore I'll be friends with that kind of person. And I think that we kind of can sometimes, stop ourselves from being open to new experiences. And, when I look at the different experiences that I've had over the years, because I've been open to finding people who are like-minded, I think that's really important. But, if I'm a cross-stitcher type of person who likes to, do that kind of handiwork, but I meet up with someone who likes to use a sewing machine, being open to kind of, venturing out. And I think about how broad my talents and skills have developed over the years because I've been open to trying new things.
Yeah, I've seen you do that. There was somebody that was into quilting and you became friends with a quilter. You'd never quilted, but all of a sudden you were quilt crazy. The other thing that really strikes me is it's hard, right? Like a lot of parents are dropping the kids off at after school hours care, picking them up before and, late or early or whatever it might be. And it's just hard to find the time to actually meet people. Parents are dropping the kids off in the car and picking them up in the car. They're not getting out and having conversations and that kind of thing. But again, there's something that we've really encouraged the kids to do is get phone numbers of their friends' parents and make those meetings happen one way or another. Invite somebody over, go to the park, meet up at a school thing. Just making those things happen can really help.
I did something a little bit crazy on one of our moves. Our kids were really, really struggling to kind of make connections. And so I actually wrote a little letter.
Oh, yeah.
And I got the teachers to hand it out to the students that my children felt an affiliation towards. And I just kind of let them know that, my name's Kylie. We've moved into the area. My children are really struggling and they love spending time with your child at school. I would love it if we could organise a play date at the park. And I didn't get a huge response from that, But the few mums that actually did contact me became such a lifeline to my children and to me as we started to develop relationships in that new space.
What I love about that is the vulnerability. And I remember when you did that, we were devastated because we only had a handful of replies. We put out a lot of letters and we were like, man, here we are. We're actually opening ourselves up and saying, we're lonely. We've only just moved in. Our kids need friends. We wouldn't mind some friends too. Would you be willing to get in touch? But I guess it just highlighted how a lot of people probably had the best of intentions, but they were like, oh, I'm so busy. We're working full time. We don't have time in the afternoons. Our weekends are caught up with sport and with shopping and with getting the house in order for next week's crazy. But like you said, those couple of parents that did respond, we actually made great friendships with them.
We did, and I'm still in contact with a few of them, in spite of the fact that we're not in that same community anymore.
Well, we hope that these ideas help the anonymous person who got in touch and said, we really need help. We've been there, we understand, and hopefully those ideas don't just build better relationships for grown-ups, but also they build better relationships for the kids as well. If you've enjoyed the podcast, as always, we invite you to jump onto Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review so that people can find the podcast. It's those ratings and reviews that make all the difference in moving the Happy Families podcast up the podcast rankings. A very big thank you to Justin Rulon and Craig Bruce, our executive producer, for making the podcast sound great. If you'd like more info on how we can help your family be happier, all you need to do is go to happyfamilies.com.au or check out our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families.